father and mother, but you can't say married a sister and brother. Her her mother's brother. I can't think of any good way to tell it.
Okay,
I have to say.
this is the start.
Yeah.
And let me first introduce this by holding this up. For the last several days of Christmas 1992, we've been putting together this more than 100-year, almost 150, no, even in some cases up to 200-year history of all related to the Rood family. And we call it, here we say, collection of photographs, history, and memorabilia for the Rood family children. And then we go in section 1, the Addison family, in terms of photographs, and we'll be talking about those. And then we go to Rood family photographs, and in each case we go beyond that. You know, we'll go Addison and Smith and many more. Then we go back to what we call history and memorabilia, which is things like copied history written by grandmother and someone else from obviously something they found and copied, and other old records that someone had put together.
They copied a history written by their grandmother.
Oh, it was written by their grandmother. So what we're going to do is talk about different things in this book and fill in things that might not be in the book. So it's let's just start right here. We might as well just start and sort of go through pages. And here is it on the lower, which I know won't show up on the camera, but it's
but in the front row, they'll see your great-great-grandfather and your great-great-grandmother, and then your great-grandfather there with all his brothers
and their names
sisters.
are
Ebenezer Smith and Mary Ann Haddon Smith were the great-great-grandparents, and this would be your great-great-grandfather with all his brothers and
Frank
sisters.
Isaac Smith.
Frank Isaac Smith.
And all the brothers and sisters.
They had 13 children, and 2 of them were twins, and they died at birth or right in infancy. But there were 11 that all here that grew up.
Mm-hmm. And all of the family went to college.
All boys. The girls in those days, even boys didn't much go.
Right, but
the
it
girls
was mostly
didn't
boys.
at all.
Mostly boys in the family.
Yeah, 8 boys and 3 girls, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It is. They all went. All of them were professional men, either doctors, lawyers, or ministers, or Uncle John was what you call a professional farmer. He had other people who did farms, and he owned them or something like that, I guess. And then the Flory family
Okay, we'll switch
has
now.
something interesting. The Flory family is my mother's family. This is her father's family. That's her mother's family.
So my grandmother's mother.
Yes. No, your grandmother's mother.
Mother, and my grandmother's mother's mother.
So those would be your great-great-great-grandparents, I believe. There's something interesting about her mother and father in that it was a brother and sister who married a brother and sister. And you might not catch that from this, but this was my Uncle Orange who married my mother's mother. And her name was, let's see, no, this is all the Flory family. But he married one of the Smith family over here. He married her, and so it made a brother and sister that married a brother and sister.
Mm-hmm.
And as aunt and uncle, they were real blood uncles, both of them. No,
That's very unusual.
Because this grandfather, great-grandfather of yours, married this Flory girl, and this great-aunt Matt of mine, your great-great-aunt Matt, married a Flory boy, brother, my Uncle Orange. My Uncle Orange was a very interesting man. I used to go there a lot. They lived in Dunreath, Indiana, a little town. And he was quite unusual. For one thing, he played the piano like I've never heard anybody since hardly play the piano. He could play anything, he would just make it go from
And
one end to
by
the
ear and
keyboard, by
note.
ear and notes too. He had loads, stacks of music. I wish I had it all today. Um, Not only, their piano was very unusual too. I never saw one before in a sense like it. Instead of just a pianissimo and a fortissimo pedal, it had 4 pedals. And the first one made tremolo, it was called, and it made the whole piano just sound real pretty. And oh, when he got going with that tremolo, it was really something. And then the second one was called orchestra, and I can't describe the sound, but it was different. It just didn't sound like a piano. And I've never seen one like that before in a sense. Piano playing was just kind of a hobby of his, I guess. But in addition to that, he was very interested in medicine. Probably always wanted to be a doctor because he had doctor books in loads of them in shelves. I used to read them when I was there every summer, looking up all the interesting parts I could find in them. And he was health officer of Dunreath. I don't know what health officer was, but since he was so interested in all kinds of medicine, he was the health officer. And actually, they had no doctor, and I think people came to him because he was the best thing they had, closest thing to a doctor. Another one of his interests was botany, I guess you could, like Luther Burbank, into trees and plants. And he grafted trees all the time. They had a tree in their front yard that would have, on the same tree, apples, pears, and peaches, because he took limbs from an apple tree and grafted it onto a pear tree and vice versa. And it was always very interesting to me as a kid to see these different fruits growing on the same tree, because he was so had a lot of things like that he did. And was an early to bed and early riser, up with the sunrise every morning and out working on those trees, and just a very interesting man. But he was old when I knew him. Of course, I never, until I saw this picture, I never even thought of him as being young. He had a white beard, white all over here, and pretty long, about down to here, all the time I knew him.
Anything about Aunt Matt?
Oh, I used to stay with her every summer, and I thought an awful lot of Aunt Matt.
In Dunreath.
In Dunreath, This was after Uncle Orange died, and I went and stayed with her every summer. And when I was at Earlham, I'd come back at Thanksgiving because she was closer. And we all thought an awful lot of her. She always wished that I was her granddaughter because she had no children. They had adopted 2 children, but she didn't have, and they had both died. And so by this time, because she was quite old then. But I liked staying there.
See, any other questions? And this would have been taken in Indiana.
Oh, I'm sure. They all lived in Rush
And this
County.
would have been in Indiana.
Yes, because they all lived in Rush
So
County.
both of these
Yeah.
families were in, right?
For a while, they started when they were first married in South Carolina, but shortly after moved to Indiana. So during the Civil War, because this was around the time of the Civil War, it was, of course, the Civil War was such a terrible war because it split families. So they had many relatives in the South, and there was families that were divided on both sides.
And, we'll talk about
Grandpa?
grandfather in a minute, but
Okay.
we don't know any of the other things these people did in the Civil War. Did you say
None
they
of
did-
them
none of
fought.
them-
None of them fought in the Civil War. No.
And that also meant none of them had to fight against their relatives.
No, that would have been just so terrible that they didn't.
Well, I don't think I have any other questions.
No.
We don't know if these families live close to each other or anything like that,
No, I don't know how they met.
or how
It
anybody
was
met.
all in that area of Indiana, I think. Newcastle.
So we wouldn't know like how Dr. Isaac Smith met
No, I don't.
Florella.
No, I
Florrie.
don't know.
Well, let's then go to Dr. Isaac Frank Smith, which was grandmother's father.
Yes, and for the first time when we were looking through all these old pictures and papers and everything, I noticed a couple times his name was called Isaac Franklin Smith. And all I ever heard was Dr. I.F. Smith. But I guess the Frank must have been Franklin, but probably was never used and only saw it in the pictures.
And we know he took a lot of photographs all over the country.
Oh, yeah, you've got
He took lots of photographs.
He was
and
into photography quite a
he
bit.
especially like trains and to photograph,
Mhm.
that is, or any spectacular
Yeah.
scenes.
There's an interesting story about my mother. I noticed she has an earrings on, and of course that meant pierced ears. They didn't have any other kind. And she told me once that they did it quite young, just like they do now on little girls that have pierced ears. I think even Emily has her ears pierced. All little children. Does Allison have her ears pierced? Well, a lot of little kids do. Anyway, they wanted to have her to have earrings, and she didn't want them to pierce her ears. But they promised her, lured her with that if she would let them pierce her ears to wear earrings, then they would pierce the kitty's ears and put pink ribbons in the kitty's ears. And so, and I guess it didn't bother the kitty too much, and the kitty wore the pink ribbons in its ears, and grandma. But that's how they got her to have her ears pierced.
Pretty devious.
Huh?
Pretty devious.
Well,
It was the incentive.
Nice word.
The incentive.
Incentive.
Anything else? Now we know that he lived in California for a while.
No. Well, he lived in Washington D.C. for a while, I know, and I forget the continuity of that. Not Mama. Your grandmother went to California with Aunt Matt and Uncle Orange and lived a while, but
They lived in California.
yes, but I
for a
don't
while.
think Grandpa did.
I thought he did. He took pictures out there.
Oh, probably a trip or something, I imagine. He may have gone out to see my mother when she was out there. Might have, I don't know.
So we know that for a while, going back to, that would have been Uncle Orange, who was
They lived in California.
grandmother's mother's brother,
Mm-hmm.
and his wife, who was grandfather's
They lived in California.
sister,
Uh-huh.
moved to California
They
after
did.
before they lived in Dunreath.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you don't know why they moved to
Well,
California.
actually, I guess it was to take grandmother out there because they wanted to forget about.
Oh, they only moved for that.
Well, that's what I've always heard. They thought if she was, they were getting very serious, and they.
I mean, they weren't already living out there.
No.
So they just said, well, we'll move to California.
Well, I don't know if they said they'd moved, but they just wanted her to.
They went out there.
I don't think.
How
they
could
were
they just
already-
up and?
I don't think they were already living out there. I'm not certain of that, but I know that was the idea.
You wouldn't know what kind of job he would have that you could just go out to California.
No, but I do know that they bought land in Long Beach, California, which now it would be right in the heart of town, and we'd all be millionaires. But they sold it and came back to Indiana. But it was right in the heart of Long Beach where they owned this land.
Mm-hmm.
Which now would.
And grandmother owned some land for
Yes,
some
because
time.
in letters, they must have given her some or something, because in letters from Papa and Mama together, there was, I remember mentioning the land that she had.
Mhm. And I thought she had it up to the 50s or something.
Oh, no, I don't know when that, I don't know when, but she didn't
Not
they
that.
never had it when I knew about it.
Okay.
It had been gone long ago.
Mhm. So he lived in Washington D.C. for a while.
Yes, and I don't have much details on that, but I know that we've had so many connections with Washington D.C., and that was one of them, that he lived there for a while.
Mm-hmm. Did grandmother ever live in Washington D.C.?
No, I don't think she ever did. But
Because
of course,
she was
lots of
staying-
people have. My grandfather, your father worked out of there. My brother lived in Washington D.C. There's some very interesting material. You'd be interested in that because he lived in Washington D.C. and it wasn't anything like Washington D.C. now. He worked for the REA as an artist, the rural electrification under Roosevelt. Bob, my brother Bob.
And
And
meanwhile,
then, we had other connections with Washington D.C. Of course, you too. What else? We've had a lot of connections with Washington D.C.
meanwhile, I'm gonna always try and say names because the video won't be able to pick up pictures. When grandmother's mother died when she was 10.
When grandmother was 10 years old.
When Florey died, something. Let's see, where do I see it? 1892.
When grandmother was 10, she was born 1882.
1882, and then grandmother went to live
With different aunts and uncles.
different aunts and uncles.
Lots of these.
Sometimes
Different ones of these.
Aunt Matt and Uncle Orange.
Oh yes, she was with them probably the most.
The
but
most.
she also lived with Uncle Doc, I think, and Uncle Alfred for a while because,
Different times
Mhm.
she lived, but probably didn't go to Washington D.C.
Not that, no, I don't think
That was
she
the first
did.
thing she didn't
No.
do. Mhm. And then here's pictures of grandmother, Luva Marie Smith Addison. I won't always say the names, so that when she was very little, like 3, and then maybe like 8,
Oh, what? No, she's a lot more than 8 in that picture. What do you mean?
12. What do you think?
More, a little more,
16?
maybe. Something like that, probably.
And then this would be more like 20.
Young adult, I'm not
Or
sure.
early 20s. And then here's a picture of
My father,
Edwin Addison.
Edwin Addison. He didn't have a middle name.
No middle name.
Edwin Addison.
And if you look at this picture, there's something strange in that it looks like you're seeing through a book.
To another book.
And grandmother took this,
She took the
picture.
picture on the old glass
Luva
natives.
Marie Addison.
And when it was developed, it's like it's a transparent book. You can see
Mhm.
through it into another one, and we never did know how that could happen, but it did.
Mhm. And we don't have it in here, but when we're talking about grandmother, we really need to get a picture of her in her garden in the book.
Yes, that would
If you
be
could
nice.
find one, it
I
really, you
expect we
can't
have
not
one.
have that.
Yeah.
And she always had a huge, all the time I knew her,
Yeah.
a huge garden
Yeah, even
behind her
when I
house.
was little, I remember she had nasturtiums and cosmos and hollyhocks and always had flowers.
Huge garden, and we'll
Not as big as she had on Franklin Road, but
Mhm.
a lot of fun.
well, the one I remember is on Franklin Road.
Yeah.
Do you remember the address?
70 North Franklin Road?
70
Yeah.
North
Mhm.
Franklin Road, Indianapolis, Indiana, and a big garden is totally across the backyard in 3 sections, with one on one side, one on the other side, and then a big round one behind those 2, and so thick that it would be probably each garden 30 feet deep, something like
Yeah.
that, with small things in front going up to big high things 6 feet high in the back. Let's see,
Then they set out lots of wildflowers in the woods.
and then in the
behind it. It
woods,
was covered with
I used to go
wildflowers.
pick wildflowers and bring them to grandma.
Back 1,000 feet.
The lot was very deep. It was like a forest.
Yeah.
In fact, I thought of it as going into the
Yeah.
forest, and would find reeds and make little stick houses.
Back
And,
when we were dating, we used to have weenie roasts back there, remember?
it was
With Dorothy
it was
and Sherman and-
truly a forest.
Uh-huh.
It was the woods. You were totally in the woods.
Mhm.
Let's see,
Got it from that.
and there's a picture of grandmother with her kitty.
I forget, that's not Cinder, because
That's not
Cinder was all
Cinder.
black,
Mhm.
and I can't think which one
Oh,
that
yeah.
was, and I don't,
That was
I
Marcus.
don't think
yeah.
it was Muffy. I don't know, there were
Um,
several along there somewhere, and I don't know
I
which
can't
one that
remember.
was.
Okay, now we're going to pictures of mother here.
These were all
Catherine
taken on the
Katie
glass,
Lucille Addison Rood.
they were all taken on those glass negatives,
Right.
because grandmother was into photography too.
Now she developed them too.
Oh, yeah.
So she took the picture and she developed it, and the negatives were the same size as the prints, because when I took these in to be printed, they just put them down on a piece of paper, photographic paper, turned on the light, exposed it, and then lifted the negative off. And you were living always in Indianapolis during all these pictures,
On the north side,
on the north side, around.
North Pennsylvania, and I don't know, I don't remember all the names of the
Mhm.
streets.
And later we'll get some other pictures of different ages. And is this still North Pennsylvania?
Oh, no, that was on South Sherman Drive. where
South
we had
Sherman
a
Drive.
15 acres where Papa had, cows and
A big garden.
two horses. Oh, yes, I called it a farm, but 15 acres isn't called a farm.
Well, how
And
much
that
of it
was
did he have growing?
Oh, a lot of it.
Oh, a lot of 15
Corn
acres?
and watermelon, they take a lot of space,
Yeah.
cantaloupe and
But like
watermelon.
acres and acres was till,
Oh, it's hard to say.
well, I mean,
Maybe not more than 3 or 4.
yeah, but not just a little garden in the
No,
front
no,
yard.
it wasn't a little garden.
Yeah.
And then you had we had a pasture for the animals, big pasture.
Mhm. Okay, then we're now changing to Rood family photographs, and we start up here with the Shirley family, which was a grandma, Ruth Shirley,
No, Grandma Shirley Rood, you got it backwards.
grandma, well, I said her first name,
Oh,
Ruth,
yeah.
not
Oh,
Ruth.
Ruth, oh, I didn't hear
Ruth.
that,
Ruth Shirley Rood,
That's her parents.
was her mother and her father, and then in a little photograph here she is,
Her whole family.
her family. And then her father, her mother's father, Henry Newell, there's quite a he had written a
An
little
interesting saga.
interesting
about him.
biography of his time on ships, and doesn't he look like a ship
Yeah,
person on ships?
He was
that-
really,
He just looks like a sailor person.
did all over the world on the ships.
Went all over the world.
As he said, had a checkered experience.
Is there anything else that we know of him besides?
Well, he was a 33rd degree Mason, which is not too many of them around.
Now you might have met him, right, Dad?
I think I kinda remember him just vaguely because I was pretty young then. But I think I remember
He would
going
have been
over
your
the Knowles.
great-grandfather.
And I think he lived over with
Mhm.
the Newells and I'd go over there
A-
occasionally.
And
on
this would have been in
Sunday.
Omaha.
Yeah.
And do you
You
remember?
wouldn't have known him very long, because he was your great-grandfather, and,
Right.
you know,
In fact, I think he died at about the time I left Omaha.
probably.
And,
Oh, yeah, he was 92 or 94 when he died, so you probably would have known him.
and see, that was in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think he died in 1928.
So he
You would have
was,
been 13, yeah.
Right.
No,
Well,
I
guess
would've,
you-
I would've been in Miami by then. So
Oh,
back
yeah,
then.
Oh,
that's
right.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
so
Miami
do you
back
know,
then.
you know where in Omaha? East side,
No.
west side? Just
I-
in the city, in the
In the
country?
city.
Apartment, house?
No, I was in the city.
In an apartment,
No, in a house.
in a house,
Yeah.
Mhm.
in a house. And then here's, let's see, I got lost here.
I remember the other Newell kid. I remember sleeping on the floor there when we went over there. With some of the other kids, the Newell kids.
Oh, when you went to the Newells.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember any of them really.
You're
Wish
too
you did.
young.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, Dad, here's you with, grandfather and then step-grandmother Shirley,
Yeah.
because, Grandma's mother had died when we found out was 6.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he remarried, and, you're probably about what here?
Oh, probably around 12, 13.
Mhm.
I
And
guess.
where do you think this was?
I was in Brown County.
Oh, that's right, it says on
See,
there.
they were visiting Brown County, and the
think-
sign that was put up in Brown County is spelled Cowntty. Do you know
Right,
that?
yeah. That's,
They were here in
must be
Indiana.
the old time.
No, I think that was just for.
Probably somebody misspelled it.
No, I think that was just for.
Oh, maybe they wanted to be quaint or
Yeah.
something.
'Cause
Oh.
that's-
Mhm.
Way back, in the
Yeah.
1500s, you used a W for that, so
Yeah.
they were trying to be.
Maybe.
In the 1500s, what? Mhm.
It-
What?
Is he on the phone?
You should call him back then.
Who is it?
Chip called, we can take a break.
Oh, well, why don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we'll take a break
Mhm.
and, go from there.
Okay.
Okay, we took a break to do a number of things, including, go to the hardware store and fix a broken toilet, which of course ended up taking 2 trips to the hardware store, and none of the parts that were in the first package worked, and none of the parts in the second package worked, but by combining the packages, we made it work. So it had a happy ending, or at least a successful
We
ending.
think so.
Right. We had just left off here with the Shirley
Okay.
grandparents, your grandparents, and I said you were in Brown County, but where were you? You were living in Indianapolis
Yes,
then?
They were visiting in Brown County.
they were visiting and we went to Brown County.
Yeah.
with them.
And how is that as opposed to, like, why don't you just do a quick, when you were in Omaha, when you were in Florida, when you returned to Indianapolis?
Well, I'm born in Omaha, raised mainly by my grandparents there, this couple here. And saw mother usually on weekends till I was 10, or a little past 10, at which time mother married my stepfather, and we moved to Miami for a year and a half, went through a hurricane, and came back to Indianapolis.
Mhm. So for much of 1 through 10, you were in Omaha?
All
Of 1 through 10. And from Omaha to Miami?
year and a half.
No, I mean, you went straight from Omaha to Miami.
Well, he stopped off here. Dad wanted to visit his relatives here,
Mm-hmm.
parents and his sisters and brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his brothers went down to Florida with us. 2 of them did.
And that was to get into the real estate business.
One of them
And-
was in the real estate business with him. I don't know about the other one. I don't remember about that.
Mm-hmm. And then that the real estate business wasn't going well before the hurricane.
Well, the whole Florida thing crashed. The real estate business just absolutely crashed in 1925 and early 1926, and then later in 1926, well, it hadn't had a hurricane down there for 100 years, so everybody thought, well, there's a hurricane. This is interesting. Let's go to Miami Beach and see what's doing over there.
Mm.
But for the fact that my uncle's car had a slow leak, we might have gone over there, because there's a mile-long causeway between Miami and Miami Beach. Causeways, roadway built up out of the bay. But he said he didn't want to go over there because he had a slow leak, so that saved us from being over there and possibly,
Swept away.
yeah, and
Lots of people were,
a
weren't
lot of
there?
people, well, what happened was, not so many people went over to see the storm. Mother said, oh, I just love to see these ocean in a storm.
Now
I
that
didn't know what she was talking about. But anyway, the first half of the hurricane hit, and of course it was devastating on Miami Beach and Miami too. There were 300 or 400 people killed in that.
Mm.
But so many of them were killed because as soon as the eye of the hurricane got to Miami, everything cleared off. It was beautiful. No wind, wonderful day, and everybody said, I wonder what's happened over at Miami Beach. And they got in their cars and started across this mile-long causeway. And the causeway was just absolutely solid lines of cars. The second half came and blew almost all of them off into the bay.
Mm.
And I know I've talked to people who were fishing bodies out of the bay for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to change crews pretty frequently because it was too hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Would you have been in the first group or the second group?
we would have gone over earlier, and
Mhm.
I don't know what would have happened.
Probably the same thing.
It could have been the same thing, yeah.
Mm.
Well, then after Dad lost most of his money that he had in real estate, he had a little bit left, so he and his brother started a garage. And the hurricane came along and demolished the garage and all the cars in the garage, which there were, I don't know, 20 or 30 cars in the garage. And so he was liable for all those cars, and so we ended up without any money, strangely enough. So
And it was at that point.
It was at that point that shortly after that, we came back to Indiana.
Mm-hmm. And what was their plan then? I mean.
Come up here and get a job,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which he didn't get for quite a while.
Because we went pretty much after that into the Depression.
Oh, that's right.
It
Soon
came
after
right
that
after
would
that.
be.
The big
Mm-hmm.
depression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The big one.
Right, right. And here's your mother,
Yeah.
Ruth
Yeah.
Eleanor Shirley Rood
That's your
Thomas.
grandma.
Mm-hmm. And
That's her brother, Uncle Perry. He was a great guy, but he died in his 30s because he had an appendix burst and didn't get to treatment soon enough and died from that.
he wanted to go back to.
He wanted to get back to Omaha before he went to the hospital. He didn't want to go to the hospital someplace else, so he was on the train when his appendix burst. And
Do you know where he was? Like how far from
I
Omaha?
don't know.
10 miles or 100
No,
miles?
it was more like several hundred, three
Oh,
or 400. Maybe
Mhm.
here, I don't know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Not here, but I mean, you know, in this area.
mm-hmm. Now, something we don't have a picture in here that is one more to add is of Richard Thomas,
Yeah.
who
my
is
stepfather.
your stepfather, who
Uh-huh.
you just talked about.
Yeah.
And we'll have to, that's one that's not in this group,
Yeah.
one of the many that when you're going through more pictures. But then we move to your biological father.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know a thing about him.
right, but we at least have pictures
We didn't-
here.
We didn't
And-
find out where he was until after he died.
Right, and here with his wife Florence,
Yeah.
who you did get to know,
Yes, we got to know Florence.
and took care of her, sort of visited her,
Well,
visited her,
Yeah, there were things.
and did things
To know.
for her. And then this is your biological father when he was young with
Two aunts, two of his sisters,
and mother,
and
Grandma
mother.
Rood.
Grandma Rood, yeah.
and grandma,
Yeah.
and his grandma, who would have been your great grandmother.
Yeah.
And these are pictures of you
Yeah.
in Omaha
Yeah.
and with friends you remember their names.
Playmates.
And you said you remembered where they lived,
They lived close to my Aunt Doll.
but you remembered the street.
2606 Templeton, I don't know why I remember that. Well, I remember where my grandparents lived, 3613 North 24th Street
In Omaha.
in Omaha.
Mhm.
It was in a house that was up above an office, a union office, and my grandfather was stationary engineer of the University of Omaha across the street, which is actually was custodian then.
Mhm. And this was prior to going to Miami.
Oh, yes,
Mhm.
all of this, all of
Right.
these pictures are,
Oh, 'cause it's all before. And then is this still?
yes.
That would be still your under
That
10.
would be Omaha.
Okay. And here's a picture of you as a crossing guard.
Yeah.
That would be Omaha.
No, that was Indianapolis.
That's back in Indianapolis.
And this is.
So we don't have any pictures in Miami.
No,
That'd be interesting.
We may have some at home.
That'd be
we
interesting.
might.
By a palm tree or something to show Miami. And then here, is this before marriage or after marriage?
I think that was the year we were married and went to Peoria. That was taken Peoria just after we were married.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Same year, I expect.
Yeah,
Married in June, that was probably around August,
yeah.
And what year?
1937.
1937.
Don't you remember that 50th anniversary,
right.
1987?
Yes.
50 years.
I could have done that.
37.
I could have done that math.
Mm.
Let's see, and then I don't know that there's much to say about these things.
The only thing would be that this is written by grandmother and her cousin Edna copied a history that their grandmother had written. And it's really old-timey, so it's kind of interesting because it was a long time ago. And she's in this picture here, the one who wrote it, the great-grandmother. She is here in that picture, and she wrote that history. It goes clear back to the Revolutionary War, so
Mhm.
it's kind of interesting back in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, it would go back to the 1770s.
Because that wasn't too far removed from her. Yeah, it wasn't too far removed from herself.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was just in the early 1800s, so
Mhm.
that would have just been
Yeah,
like
it hadn't
us
been too
talking
long.
about the 1800s or something. Anything
Oh,
else?
I know. That's kind of interesting because it's a letter from her brother, the same great-great-grandmother of yours. It's a letter from her brother to her, and it's kind of interesting to read what a brother would write back in those days to his
Mhm.
sister, a letter from
Mhm.
him. And we have it both in typewritten, so you can read it a little easier, and then in his own
And
handwriting.
it's 1851.
1851.
Certainly.
Probably a little different from letters a brother would write to a sister now.
Or a phone call.
Or a phone call, yeah.
Be
Or a
more
fax.
likely.
Uh-huh.
And then this is a patent, no, it's a rights
rights to a patent.
rights to a patent to a device called a clothes pounder.
My grandfather had an interest in this patent or something, so Bob had always said, now you can see why I've always said that Helen was the only normal one in our family, because we all, including anybody who would get a patent on a clothes pounder, which was, I guess, to wash clothes like this,
Mhm.
instead of on the rocks or something, but better than a washing machine where you had to go like this. I
Mhm.
don't know whether he ever made any money off of it or not.
And here are the certificates of graduation.
Well, this is a program of the
Of the program,
graduation, when you
right.
graduate from medical school.
Right. And, see, it's October 6th, 1907 for Isaac Frank Smith. And then we've included a story.
That's, as Edith says, a rather humorous account of the story of your grandmother and grandfather's wedding when she came back from California. And it was quite different because there was all kinds of problems with it, and it's written up rather humorously in the Arlington newspaper. They
Not
were married
unlike,
on, oddly enough, on April the 1st, April Fool's Day,
Mhm.
after Papa had waited 5 days because her train from California was delayed by the floods. 5 days, and he was waiting all that time for her.
Mhm.
Waiting with the marriage licenses
And a copy of the train ticket
of her
that-
train ticket.
that she had,
Mhm.
dated, what is it dated?
Be 1901, I think, because that's when they were married. That's enough.
Now that, he graduated in '07?
I don't know, we'll figure
Yeah, that,
figure it out later.
I just realized he graduated from medical school after she was married.
I guess so, if that's what it says.
Mhm.
Or wait a minute, no,
No,
this
no.
is something he presented. That's not his diploma. This was a different. I
Oh,
don't
this
have
is
the
a
glasses on.
certificate.
That was something he needed to turn in.
Oh,
somewhere
that's right.
later.
You're right, that's a certificate
Yeah, what was
showing, the date on this is
program?
1877.
He graduated from Western Reserve Medical School in
1877.
Yeah, this is the program of the graduation, but this is just a,
That's
I
good.
don't know, something he needed to,
That's good to point that out, because I had thought of
oh
this
yeah,
as
he didn't
the,
graduate, well, Mama would have been.
I
no,
thought
no.
that
No, that was way before that.
would have been
Mhm.
surprising. And then there's a detailed information about Henry Newell, who you may remember is the person,
Grandma's grandfather,
grandma's grandfather.
her mother's father.
Right. And he goes into great detail about his days at sea and his amazing.
It so happens it's very interesting, and when you say great detail, you'd think it wouldn't be, but
No,
it is.
it is
'Cause he had
interesting.
quite
It's
a
very interesting.
life on the sea.
Very interesting life, yes.
Mhm. One I would not want to.
No.
No. Good for
He's
that.
quite an adventuresome
Yes, he was.
person.
Mhm.
Always looking. He even admits he's looking for adventure.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, he
Since-
wanted
Since the
adventure.
time he was a kid.
He wanted the adventure, and he got it.
He got it.
He got
But he
plenty
got
of
enough
adventure.
of it and didn't want.
And
anymore.
I can see why he got his top. Well, that's sort of a
Another little interesting note is in this part here. It looks like it wouldn't be too interesting to look at. It's a bunch of names and dates. But hidden in it, or not hidden, but down in it, it tells about the twins, which were
oh, yeah, this is interesting.
born in our family. And we found out in doing all this, we have 3 sets of twins in our family. So I guess it wasn't that unusual for us to have twins.
Mhm.
But at the World's Fair in Omaha in 1899, when Grandma's, which one was I don't have my glasses on.
Lydia Newell.
Oh yeah, that would be this Henry Newell, the one who went to sea and all that. When she had twins, and she died in childbirth, and the twins were put in this incubator on display all the time at the World's Fair.
In
Because
1899.
in 1899, it was the first incubator that was ever made or used. So these twins from her family were in there for a week or 2 weeks, or I don't know how long, because it was the first
Mhm.
incubator there was.
Mhm.
So we figured that anybody in our family could have twins.
Yes.
Mhm.
Any of your kids could have twins.
Right.
So beware.
Uh-huh.
Well, are there any other
Well,
interesting
not
things?
what's in this book. We have lots more stuff at home, but
Oh,
that's
piles.
enough for now, I think.
Yeah.
So it'll be further augmented with the sequel.
Yeah.
This is Rood Family 1, and then like they do, Jaws 2, and
Maybe 5
uh,
years later or something.
Yes.
We have to
We'll have
recover from this one
Home
first.
Alone 2,
Yes.
then we'll have Rood Family History 2, and then Rood Family History
Yeah.
3, as you dig deeper into
Right.
your boxes.
But we need a few years to recover from this one.
Right.
Lot of effort to put together such a
Yeah.
compendium, might be the word.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Uh,
Good word.
if you want more information on this, call 1-800 555-1212 and ask for information for the Rood Archives.
Yeah.
And they'll definitely know the number.
Mhm.
And then just for $24.95, you not
Yeah.
only get the Rood family photographs, but you get some of the boxes we have stored in our garage that we, of course, don't know
Yeah.
what's in them. We will not even open them before we ship them to you, to make the surprise even better.
I'm sure you'll be deluged with orders.
In fact, if you act really fast, we can make it 2 boxes. I did peek in one, however, and just to make it more exciting to you, I can tell you that I found parts to old gutters that don't fit any gutters on this house. So they're likely to fit your gutters. And so if you want some parts to gutters that don't fit most gutters, but might be useful for some situation, you don't have to use them for gutters even. You might think of some other
Be creative.
creative solution for those. I also have a complete box full of those handy dandy press-in aluminum and plastic S-shaped lawn landscape stoppers so that your garden doesn't get weeds in it. And they say simply dampen the ground and press it in with your foot. And every time we thought it would be a great idea, no more weeding, and we ran into a yard sale that had a bunch, so we bought most of the back of the station wagon full. And when we came home, no matter how much we soaked the yard, it didn't get rid of the roots. And nothing, it did the thing of you could press it in here and it would pop up here. And but maybe somebody lives out in the desert where it's sand. You could moisten the sand and press it in. Of course, there you wouldn't have weeds, so you wouldn't need it anyway.
Well, how does it work on cactus?
It might be great. It might be great. Any other things to add?
I don't think of a thing.
No. I
Okay.
think we have
That's it.
That's
Completed.
end.
completed the deal.
Yeah.
Okay, that ends, and maybe Allison will have something to add later. That's it for now.
Fair enough.
Said they didn't, it wouldn't be right for me to get a job because it would take a job from maybe a breadwinner, you know, who had to have the money for a family, and that I shouldn't go out and be getting a job. So I went around and got dramatic art pupils, and that wouldn't take a job from anybody, you know, and taught dramatic art. Went to a church and got the whole primary list and went and knocked on doors, you know. And,
You went to you got what primary list?
well, I went to Woodruff Place Baptist
Of
Church.
people in primary
which is
grades?
where we live. Got the names. I'll bet you now they wouldn't give out names and addresses of kids, you know. And I went and knocked at the doors and told them that I would teach dramatic art to them. You
Well,
know.
some have phone books though, and church books, church phone books.
Yeah, but ordinarily I imagine if you'd go now and ask for a list of
Mhm.
names of children, they probably
Oh, well,
wouldn't give it to you.
right. And
But
so
they
then did you
But
have
I
some?
got
You
a-
had
oh,
some
Oh yeah, I got a whole.
students.
Some I taught in a class and some individually.
And what are examples of things you taught?
Dramatic art is,
I mean-
it's readings. Like children used to give readings. You would have, like if you had company, you'd have Allison give a reading, you know.
Oh, I see.
Some of them are funny. Now they don't do that anymore, but The
So,
children
so
learned
they
reading
didn't
at
do
home.
like, you
And
didn't
we'd give a
try,
recital and the parents would come.
it was all toward how you would read.
Oh, no, you don't know what I meant by reading. It's like
No,
you
I understand, I mean, it's like reading a play.
Yeah, not a play,
No,
they
it's-
would
they
be
memorize
humorous,
it.
you memorize humor, and you
They
learn to
get
do the
poems.
gestures and.
Would you
know.
memorize it always?
Oh, well, you couldn't.
You
Anybody
said
gonna
do a
get it.
reading.
You use the word, it used to be a word you used, you'd say to give a reading, it meant a dramatic art, you didn't read, no. You gave it, you memorized it, and you put in
Mhm.
all the dramatic
Very
stuff.
similar to a speech team kind of
Yeah,
thing.
just like that, uh-huh.
It might be humorous, it
And it
might
was
be
very
dramatic.
popular, kids did it, like they took music lessons, you take dramatic art lessons, you know.
Oh.
And we had a recital. Mine was in conjunction with a girl who taught music, and it would intersperse the music pieces that they'd give at the recital.
Mhm.
Then a child would get up and they'd give a reading, and I had humorous ones and pathos ones and everything like that, you know.
Mhm.
But they said I could do that because that wouldn't take a job away from
You
anybody.
remember what you got paid?
Oh, it was very little, 50 cents for a private lesson and 25 cents for a class if I had a
Mhm.
class. And they came to my house, you know, on Parker
Mhm.
Avenue.
And how long would a lesson be?
Oh, half an hour. I
That's
believe
not
it
too
was.
bad.
Well, you don't make big money, but in that
Well, no,
day,
but I'm
for the
thinking,
depression, you
yeah.
know,
25 cents for
A
each
class.
person per
yeah,
class?
it was in the class, but 50 cents if it was.
How many would be in the
private
class?
lesson. Oh, I usually had 6 or 7 in a class, and private would be 50 cents. But I liked it, and I was straight out of dramatic interpret Earl, you know, and I liked doing it. It was fun, and I liked the kids and working
50
with
cents
them.
then was quite a bit.
Well, still wasn't a lot, but
Well.
it was nice. Mhm.
Now, this was, you weren't married.
Oh, no, I hadn't even met you then.
So this was, how
I
old
think-
were you?
Oh, 18.
Hmm.
It must have been, yeah, I was 18, because that's when I left Earl and I wanted to get a job. However, then I got a scholarship at Indiana Extension, which is actually, now it'd be called IUP, Extension of Bloomington,
Mhm.
you know, and got to go there a year, so I dropped it then, and I wasn't doing it.
Mhm. And then it was during that or after that you met Dad?
After that, clear after that, you know. Because we had both been in 7C classes in tech, which is creative writing, although I never was in his class and never knew you or anything. But one of my bunch from Canon staff and all started Manuscript Club after we graduated, because we still wanted to get together. And the idea was we had meetings every month, and you have to bring a manuscript that you've written, and we'd read them and critique them and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And after we'd been meeting about a year, I guess it was, somebody said, hey, let's get some new members, you know, let's get some more people and make it bigger. And so somebody said they knew, somebody had been in 7C class, they knew this Rood, and somebody knew Paul McAnally. And so I got a card that month from Bob Hyatt. It was going to be at his house, and he said, we have 2 new guys coming, and we want you and Lillian to take care of them. And so it's odd, because Lillian married Paul, and I married Dad.
You took care of us.
Mhm.
And then when we did go, and I thought you were going with Mary Lee Walker, because when we went, the first meeting, I remember seeing him when he got off the streetcar. Lillian and I got off the streetcar, and this guy was standing there. You had on white flannel pants, I remember, and a dark coat, I guess it was. And I thought, boy, you know, he looks pretty nice. I liked him. But we talked a little bit that evening, and we walked to Bob Hyatt's house from the streetcar. And then you came to the next meeting, and the next meeting after that, and Lillian and I came after you had gotten there, and Mary Lee Walker was already there. And I thought you had taken Mary Lee Walker. He had asked her, and I looked at Lillian, and we thought, might as well give up. He's already got a girl, you know. And it was Mary Lee Walker.
No.
And I thought that for a while, because I couldn't tell, you know, when you come to the
Right.
meeting, she was there and he was there, and they were sitting, you know, and I thought, too late, you know. So I
Did
can't
they
do it.
publish something or what?
But he wasn't
No.
going to.
This, you
Oh,
just
we-
get together and talk about writing and?
Yeah, because we all
Critique
liked
each other's
writing.
works.
Oh,
Mhm.
several of us had, some of them had poems published in poetry
Mhm.
magazines and stuff, but it was fun. It was lots of fun. We liked, and we had fun besides the manuscripting. We had games. We used to play sardines, you know, and all that. One time at our house, Barbara Dyer you know how you play sardines, you turn on all the lights all over the house, and then one person hides, and the rest of you, it's all dark, and everybody tries to find them, but when you find them, you
You
don't
stay
say
there,
anything, you
right.
stay there. So you're all maybe, oh gosh, no, crowded in a closet or whatever, and it's dark. And Barbara Dyer, one of them, when she came out in our dining room, she was, anyway, playing it, a chair thing like that, chair rung there, she leaned down and it went straight in her eye. And oh, it just, I mean, everything, of course, it was real bad. It turned black and blue and purple and yellow and everything, but it didn't hurt her eye. So that kind of put a damper on playing sardines.
Mhm.
But we did fun games besides
Mhm.
the manuscripts, and they were fun too.
Now, then soon
So that's how I met Dad.
So you met, and then, how long between then and, when was that compared to 1937?
That was 1935, or 34. We went together 2.5 years before we got married.
Mm. And what was a typical date?
One time I remember we went down to the monument to go clear up to the top, you know, and come down, go to a show, you know,
Movie.
or he'd come to our movie,
Movie.
yeah. We always called it a show. Or he'd come to our house and we'd, I don't, you know, play Peggotty. We did that a lot.
And what's that?
Oh, it's a game, Peggotty, where you put,
Chinese checkers.
we've always wanted it, again, we played it so much that we've always looked for one just to have it, and finally, a couple of years ago, we found a Peggotty game. It's not the wooden pegs, we don't think it's quite like what we had, it's plastic, but we just wanted to get it because we used to play it so much
Never
on
played
the
it yet.
Well, I have with the kids,
Oh,
we haven't had time,
Mhm.
yeah.
so.
And then,
Skating rink, we did a lot of our dates
Oh,
with
yeah,
skating
we
rink,
go to-
because manuscript would go to the skating rink, the whole club.
ice skating or roller
No,
skating?
no, roller skating.
Mhm.
And they played clappy music, you know.
Mhm.
So we did a lot of that. And then we went out to Fred Drexler's, who was another manuscript guy, and his folks had a cabin on White River Cottage, I guess you'd call it. And we'd go out there and we went canoeing. And sometimes just McIndy and you and I went canoeing out at Riverside
Broad Ripple.
with the park.
Broad Ripple.
Broad Ripple, I guess.
Mhm.
On Riverside.
Things like that. I mean, that's what you did.
Mhm.
It was all
And,
fun.
and then, when you got married, is that when you moved to Scottsburg?
No, well, we lived on Colorado Avenue then, before Chip was born.
And,
Yeah.
and so Scottsburg was from when to when?
From the time Chip was born, really, right when he was born, until he was 11 months old. We were only there 11 months.
Mhm. And
Take a
then,
lot longer.
Yeah,
and then you moved back,
to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
so you first were in Colorado,
Mhm.
then you went to Scottsburg,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and where in Scottsburg, do you remember the address?
811 Key Street, wasn't it?
Key, K-E-Y?
Keith.
Keith.
Key Street.
And, then you moved back to,
University Avenue, off of Emerson Avenue,
mhm,
and then we moved. See, actually, we only lived anywhere else about 3.5 years, and ever since then,
Mhm.
we've been where we are.
mhm.
So we didn't live
Yeah,
there
'cause that's all I remember.
very much
you know.
else.
Mhm.
All of you. Chip was so small when we moved there that it's all he remembers
Mhm,
too.
mhm.
That's enough.
Okay.
Well, what happened was, I didn't even introduce it. We turned it off, and then we kept talking, and I thought, oh, we should have had it on, and then it, you know,
Mhm.
I said, well, I'm just gonna turn on the video, and,
We'll turn it off.
Time
Yeah.
to
Okay.
sign off.
Mhm.
okay, this is end of part one, really. This
Part
really
B
is.
of part one.
Yeah.
This is what?
Part B of part one.
End of part
Yeah.
one, the end of one, part B, or something. Oh, I was gonna call Allison in.
Well, turn it off till you do.
Well,
Turn it off.
it
till-
goes all staticky. Do the spoons or something.
No, I'm gonna go out.
No,
I'm
no,
gonna
I,
do it.
I want you to turn it off. Go turn it off, honey. I don't want to.
Well, she's not ready to come in right now
No.
anyway.
Yeah, please do.
She's playing with hermit crabs, so we'll
Oh.
stop.